Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on how to implement a simple customization in 3DEXPERIENCE. If anyone has any issues seeing my screen or hearing me, please raise your hand or send out a comment. My name is Mark Young, and I'm with XLM Solutions. Quick overview of XLM Solutions. So we at XLM Solutions, for those of you who do not know us, we're a complete PLM solution provider. We've been around since 2005, so we're bringing over 16 years of experience implementing PLM solutions. We really pride ourselves for being highly respected in the PLM industry for both our business and technical expertise. We are a Dassault business partner. We're also a SolidWorks certified professional service company, which is a subsidiary of Dassault, and also a partner of Aris as well, another PLM company. We always work really hard to dedicate ourselves to quality and excellence, always being up to date on the latest technologies, best practices in the market, new trends in the marketplace, etc. And we provide all aspects of PDM PLM implementations, everything from discovery workshops to implementations, customizations, which we'll talk about today, integrations to other systems like ERP, data migrations, training, and support. So we hear many times that customers say they don't need to customize their system. They don't need to customize their PLM system. So companies are hesitant to customize, 3DEXPERIENCE for fear of problems with upgrades or compatibility issues, increased complexity in working with the system. Perhaps they're afraid that the system may become unsupported. And all those are legitimate, I would say, fears and concerns to keep in mind. However, those need to be balanced by the fact that many 3DEXPERIENCE customers have implemented customizations. So, as 3DEXPERIENCE is a great system, a lot of companies like to tailor it to handle some specific needs. And with that being said, many of the APIs that Dassault provides around 3DEXPERIENCE are largely compatible across versions, meaning if you upgrade versions, those same APIs will still work. Properly constructed customizations and scripts can be easily deployed and maintained. So, part of the key is when you're developing that customization, you do it in the right way. So when you do upgrade or change environments or make change to the systems, that customization will still work. You're not hard coding values or changing code that comes, out of the box that may get overwritten per an upgrade. So you're doing it in the proper way. You can always disable scripts and put in certain diagnostics to help troubleshoot issues. So, if there's issues with the system, it may be, is it coming from the customization, or is it just a general issue bug in the system? And there's ways to disable customizations to make sure that you can determine if the issue is more a system issue or a customization issue. And really, we believe scripts or customizations can really allow customers to harness the power of 3DEXPERIENCE and really develop and deploy optimized solutions to meet their enterprise PLM needs. And of course, as I mentioned, the challenge is to balance this. You want to balance, you don't want to customize everything, but you really want to balance what can you do out of the box versus specific functionalities that need to be customized or tailored to the end user or end customer, and create that great experience, user experience within the 3DEXPERIENCE platform. So customizing, why would be some reasons to customize 3DEXPERIENCE? And here are very common areas that we see. First is that, various processes are tedious to carry out in 3DEXPERIENCE. It may require multiple clicks. it may require filling in information that could be automatically filled in. And you know, there's definitely ways to streamline processes by putting in a little bit of customization. Sometimes, you know, entering data, they're prone to mistakes, and we want to put in some data validation to make sure that, you know, that the data isn't entered mistakenly or with issues. You know, for example, if they enter make in a certain field, then other fields, you know, want to make sure they're required or formatted properly. Definitely in any case where we can remove non-value added time and speed up operations, you know, we can save money and deliver an ROI. So definitely a lot of times, you know, such customizations can optimize the system and really have users perform the work they're needing to do versus some of the manual stuff that the system may require you to do. Sometimes out-of-the-box functionality doesn't meet the business needs of the requirement. So sometimes how certain, you know, data behaves in the system, whether it's around change or issue management, quality management, project management, the out-of-the-box functionality doesn't just meet how the company needs to work, and again, it can be tailored to handle that. Also within data migration, sometimes we put in customizations to handle data transformation, where we need to transform the data from one format or one way of working to another way. You know, a simple way would be converting alpha revisions to numeric revisions, if, you know, applicable. Generating reports. There's lots of different ways to do reports within the system. There's out-of-box reports. There's the whole Excellead brand, which has all sorts of business intelligence and reporting around it. But sometimes a simple customization can really provide that specific report the customer needs. Integrations, you know, integrating to other enterprise systems like ERP. Again, there's, you know, technology, there's out-of-the-box solutions, but sometimes a simple customization can build a very point-specific integration to other systems that the company has in place. And then finally, you know, if you wanted to demonstrate some cool stuff and features, you could always write a little customization to do it. Also, when talking about customizations, it's very important, especially with 3DEXPERIENCE, to understand what you have available on the cloud versus on-premise. So, you know, I would say 3DEXPERIENCE comes in two flavors, the cloud version and the on-premise. And really a lot of, you know, to be straightforward, a lot of customizations on the cloud, you know, are not available what you can do on-premise. So for on-premise implementations, you know, there's a lot more customization capabilities than cloud, but there is still some customizations for cloud as well. And you know, for customers, you know, determining, you know, what cloud versus on-premise is right for them, you know, it's really a balancing act of, you know, how much do you want to run on cloud? You want to offload IT and infrastructure management versus, you know, you really want to maintain the system and, you know, control very specific, you know, behaviors of it down to the specific levels. And, you know, we're definitely here to work with anyone to help do that analysis and make recommendations on if a cloud or on-premise solution is correct for you. But to be clear, all customization options are available on-premise, but there are limited customizations available on cloud. So, you know, for cloud, there is the ability to make use of what's called EKL, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's a language that works mainly with the native clients like CATIA, but can also be run through some of the cloud widgets and apps. Dassault is and will be publishing web services. So there will be web services to interact with cloud implementations as well. And then finally, there's the ability to create custom widgets on cloud too. Any custom widget would still need to be hosted on a server, so on a non-DS cloud server. And with widgets on the cloud, In prior versions, it was easier to deploy them. In newer versions, Dassault has restricted them more. So the jury's still out how your own custom widget could be deployed on the cloud versus on-premise. And then, finally, just to keep in mind, if your company's strategy is the cloud, but you do need customizations, then possible there's a middle ground where we or you host your own 3DEXPERIENCE environment in the cloud, but you still have full control to it. So that could be an option as well. So what are some of the different customizations options out there? So as mentioned, 3DEXPERIENCE has a robust API, and that API is mainly around Java. So when we talk about programming in Java and using the Java API, I'm going to say that is more the traditional way to customize 3DEXPERIENCE. So 3DEXPERIENCE, to give you a little bit of background, is moving from a more of a web page centric, JSP centric solution, and usually that's called 3D Space, to more of a dashboard and widget type of solution. So the traditional ways of looking at 3DEXPERIENCE, and I can bring that up here now, kind of what you see here, where usually the URL will have 3D Space in it, is the traditional approach, where if we were to bring up a widget of some sort and see what we got working here, usually we'll go to a dash or a URL that has 3D dashboard in it, and it brings up more what's called dashboards and widgets. We have a whole separate webinar series on widgets and widget development. But the point being, going back to my presentation, the Java way of working is really more around the 3D space, and widgets, web services, EKL, which we'll get into, is more around the native clients in the 3D dashboard. So with the traditional Java, there's different objects that can be created. There's JPOs, which are Java program objects, and that code that will run on the server. So you do something, and then the processing or the operation happens on the backend server. JSPs, which are Java server pages, they can run on the server, but also can display information to the end user. It's like a web page, not necessarily a pure HTML page, but a web page that can display data. JavaScripts are code that can run on the client side and can be used to validate forms and other rich client operations. A Java bean is like a jar file, which is really just a compiled Java program that's compiled that has all the information compiled in it and be referenced. And then finally, outside of programming, within the traditional way to customize the system, there's UI components where your UI is made up of tables, web, forms, commands, menus, portals, channels, etc., which allows you to modify the user interface as well. Now, all that being said, Dassault is moving to the dashboard and 3D dashboards. And in that case, you'll most likely want to deal with creating widgets and web services. If you do go to the Dassault documentation site, they do have published web services out there, so you can see what's available and even start interacting with them. In addition, there's EKL, which stands for Enterprise Knowledge Language, which is also another language actually developed by Dassault that can work to help enhance the system both within the dashboard solutions, widgets, and their native client. Finally, there's other custom languages that can be used. Again, this is a little bit more of the back end, but there's TCL or Tickle, which is a scripting language that can run on the server, but really there's no multi-threading. It needs from a console, and usually that executes MQL, or the matrix query language. So MQL are a bunch of command lines that really allow you to do almost any operation in 3DEXPERIENCE. So update objects, delete objects, create links between objects, etc. Can be done through the MQL language. Again, going back, TQL and MQL are only available on premise. For users that will develop, usually, a lot of development could, in theory, be done in Notepad or Notepad++. A lot of times, we'll make use of a development suite that gives a little bit more richness to developing your code, lets you, have some IntelliSense, which lets you autocomplete some commands, lets you debug code better, and this gives a better overall experience for developing code. So Eclipse is one of these development suites, and it's free to be downloaded and can be accessed here. And then, as mentioned, all the stuff is really provided within the Dassault documentation. So there's MQL guides, there's API guides, or Java Docs, which has guides. There's an application development kit reference for developing integrations, etc. So there's a lot of documentation out there. It's just a matter of reading and understanding that documentation. So when you're going to hook in the code, where do you hook it in, or where do you hook it in? So there's really 3 or 4 main ways where events can be hooked in. So one is what's considered a check event, before it happens. So before you add a document to the system, run some code to check that operation should happen. For example, can I enter that document, or do I need to give the user a warning and not let that happen? You can also have an after or an action event. So after that document is added to the system, do some work. For example, add a watermark to the drawing. We can have an override event. So it kind of would override the action event. So it updates the attribute, and then after it does something else with overriding the event. And then finally, we can have commands, which are user-defined commands. They're stuff that you can, for example, right-click and run, or click a command to run, and that will do something. So maybe we have prototype and production revisions, and we want to run a command that would change that revision from a prototype to a production. And we can do that, not based on an event in the system, but based on a user command that he executes. And then finally, we can have external programs. We can have a completely standalone external program that does something. Perhaps it's a supplier portal where the suppliers can get into, and then it can access data within 3DEXPERIENCE and reflect some of the data stored in 3DEXPERIENCE, but through an external program. So widgets. Widgets are basically programs or applications embedded directly on the 3D dashboard. As I showed you, they're really based on standard web technology, basically HTML5, JavaScript, and style sheets. And really, they can work with external data, whether it's like a YouTube channel or a weather forecast. They can work with internal data, whether it be within the 3D Swim, 3D Space. They're customizable. They're user-specific. Users can move, resize, share them, and really they are self-control or little defined areas. So if data changes and you want to reload the data, you can do it just within the widget versus have to reload the whole web page, which would happen within the 3D Space world. So really they increase performance, and a lot of the operations within the widget happens on the client side, not the server side. So it increases performance. And here's an example where we added our own little widget, and we'll show you another one. Also, we have a more intensive webinar. You can see the link here, and I'd be happy to provide it to anyone for more details on creating and using widgets. If I go here, and let me see real quick. Yeah, so here is a quick video, and I'm going to lower the volume, and move through this fast, but a quick webinar, a video of the 3D dashboard. And within the 3D dashboard, we're going to take our own widget and put a widget on here. And it's a very simple widget, but it allows you to pick a type within the system and then generate the next number based on that type. So as you can see, we can pick different types and different numbers. It's just more of a proof of concept than anything else. But these widgets can be resizable. You can have multiple widgets on the screen, do all sorts of things with it. So here's one very simple example, but we definitely can provide more if anyone's interested. EKL, so EKL, I mentioned, stands for Enterprise Knowledge Language, and it's a language to define programs and procedures around the Dassault solutions, and all their brands. So it works within the various brands like CATIA, Novia, Delmia, and Smulia. Many of the examples that are out there today are around the CATIA solution and are around the native clients or the thick clients like CATIA. And really, they handle most of the basic functionality like types, attributes, functions, methods, arguments, etc. It is a true programming language. Web services. So Dassault, as mentioned, is creating more and more web services to access functionality. Web services are based on the RESTful architecture. So basically that stands for a representational state transaction. And that's where you have different types of web services based on names or verbs like post or get. Post would upload data, get would pull down data. So there's different verbs of actions that the web services would do. Before accessing any web services within the 3D experience, you need to authenticate to the platform, via a passport and call some authentication web services to connect. You also may want to use tools like Wireshark and Postman, which allows you to view the data being sent. So for example, if we wanted to pull or push information about a user, that information usually comes in the form of JSON. JSON is a way to format data. So it provides, attribute information and then the actual data. So if you're calling web services and you want to see what data is actually being pushed or pulled, you can make use of other programs like Wireshark and Postman to do that. And it should be noted that web services are still being rolled out within 3D Experience. So every release, more and more web services are being available to be accessed. In our, for example, in our widget demo, we called, various web services to interact with the platform. So the widget was calling web services to get the data and respond on the data. And the data was being transmitted in a JSON format like you see here. Now obviously this is more related to a user, but it was still a JSON format similar to what is seen here. So let's talk about some scripting examples, and first we'll do a very traditional Java-based scripting example and then go into more of an EKL scripting example. So if we're going to do this from a Java point of view and do it in the old traditional way, you know, for example, we may say we want to put a validation rule on promote. So when we promote an object, we want to have a validation rule. So we want to determine, you know, what object we would do the promotion on. In this case, it would be an issue. And we can run MQL to determine and get that policy information so we know where we can put our trigger in. We need to determine the state and the event where that trigger would happen. So, you know, it would happen on promote, and on what state within its life cycle would it happen? You know, perhaps, you know, moving from create to in work. You know, there possibly could already be triggers already in the system based on our event. And if so, we may need to, you know, replace that trigger or add or combine our trigger with what trigger is already there. So normally, in a lot of cases, if there's a trigger already there, we'll clone the out-of-the-box one, so we're not overwriting the out-of-the-box one, and we're adding to it. You know, we'll then make sure to call our new JPO method and put in the system. So all that sums up. We're going to do a trigger to act on an issue. So we'll work with the issue policy. It's going to fire on change. So we'll go to the promote trigger, and we want it to act between the create state and the next state. So we'll go to the create state within that policy. And we want to check and block an action based on a condition. So we're going to do a check trigger versus an action trigger, which would happen after the fact. And then finally, we'll append the trigger definition of our new custom trigger name. So when you are creating triggers, a lot of times you want to identify them that it is a custom one versus an out-of-the-box one. So a lot of times we'll put in an underscore and, you know, 3-character name based on the end company name to identify that it is a custom trigger versus an out-of-the-box one. So in this case, and I'm going to go through this fast because the more exciting stuff is when we come down to EKL next. But we're going to find code already in the system. And for example, there's already a trigger called EMX Common Issue Base. And we're going to make a copy of that to our own new name and call it XLM_issues. We can edit that in Notepad and modify the issue priority, check the attribute name, check its value. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to check the priority name, and if it's a certain value, it's not high, we're going to prevent it from happening. We can update the code, insert it versus MQL, which you see here, compile the code, and then we need to add the trigger to you know, to the system. So we're going to add it to the issue state create promote. We want to make sure that we call the trigger and pass the correct parameters, and then we want to promote it to active for all that to work. So so we've written already for you, you know, MQL to handle that. Again, in olden days, there were programs like Business and Matrix, which were more GUI tools to do a lot of that. But today, you got to do everything through MQL. So here are ways to do that. And if we show you that, maybe that'd be easier. We've written TQL. That has the various MQL commands to basically update everything in the system to import that trigger. Now, this is where we're going to modify the issue policy. We're going to add our program, which we'll call the code. We're going to modify the program with some various specific parameters. and then actually add the JPO or the code that the program calls, insert it, and compile it. And if you want to look at the actual code, we can see here that basically we're getting the priority attribute. We're making sure we have a value for it. And then we're saying, if it's high, if that priority value is high, return 0, make it work. If the value is not high, give the user a message and return 1, which causes it to fail and it won't happen. So that was a very simple code where we can, read data from an object in 3DEXPERIENCE, check the value, and do something with it. And we can go into these in more details for anyone that has more in-depth questions. The next is the EKL method. So as mentioned, EKL is a way to write a different type of programming language and hook it in the system. You can access EKL through the native client versus data setup, and we'll show you that. You can put different hooks or openings of where that EKL will run. You need to create a resource table to hook it in, and then put your business rule in there. For example, pre-check maturity, and then deploy the business rule. So you can also access and put EKL in through 3D Space, through the TXO or Data Model Customization app. And it lets you manage business rules and put in data in there similarly through 3D Space as well. EKL is very similar in languages as C# or Java for that matter. You would declare variables at the top. You can get variables based on syntax like this. You can have if-then statements and set things for, validation equals true to make it happen, or validation equals false to not allow it to happen. So for example, I have my native client up here, and one of the apps that we can run is our data setup app. And this will take a second to run. So when I clicked on it, let me just click on it again. It's not the right one. Oh, I gotta change, hold on. I gotta be an owner within the system to run it. And when that comes up, you will see we have a list of resource tables here, and these are different ways to categorize data. One of them is business validation on the server. And within that, we can have different validations. So here is where I can hook in or add existing code, and I can open this up. So this is business validation for business validation on the server, and within that, we can put in code after different events, as I mentioned, in the system. So pre-check maturity, post-check maturity, maturity actions. There's different openings in the system for many of the different events that you can do within the system. In this case, we have a pre-check maturity code here, and basically it's going to get the description value. It's going to check if the word training is in the description value. If it is, it will allow the change in maturity. If it's not, it will disallow the change in maturity. So let's show you how that works in real life. And we will create a new physical product. I'm just going to leave it blank here. And I'm going to save it. And now I'm going to do a life cycle on it. So if I try to life cycle it, I get an error that check maturity state failed. This rule is not validated. So I get my message here. I'm going to hit cancel. I am now going to go update my properties. Type in training in the description. Save it. And now do the promote. And it doesn't work because I have a different error message now because I don't have the necessary privileges. So I got to change myself. Let's see if it lets me do this. I'm going to change myself from owner back to author. So now if I go to promote it, it does it successfully. So that's an example of a very simple EKL that we can put in place to check various data based on events in the system using the native client and some of the widget tools as well. In addition, as mentioned, through the data model customization app here, which is an app under managed business rules, we see a lot the same, a little bit user interface that we saw through the native clients. So you don't always see the same events added through the native clients as through here, but you can also add EKL through this tool as well. But not all the EKL created through this tool will work as it does through the native client. So there's still some syncing of how that best works together. Though at the end of the day, it's a very similar user interface and parameters as you saw through the data setup client. So with all that being said, obviously for any customization, debugging and testing is extremely important. Based on whether you're using Java code or or other code, there's ways to put system outs, log files, messages to help debug the clients, enabling traces. So there's various mechanisms you can put in place to support the debugging as necessary. And it's also extremely important to test the functionality. You want to, test all the different test cases, write down your various scenarios, test them all. Even scenarios that are not likely to happen should be tested. And anything you do, you really want to do it in a development environment. Make sure you test and development in the test environment before rolling out to production. If you're going to customize, some things to consider. Should you implement a customization? And ask yourself these questions. Are users repeatedly making the same mistakes? Are you finding certain processes to be tedious? See some of the other comments I made in the why to customize. If the answer is yes, then perhaps a customization is needed. You really should define the functional criteria for the script, define all your test cases, build a test environment for testing, ensure any script that you put in place will not affect production. Definitely don't want to be on that bleeding edge where you're testing in your production environment. Also maintain the detailed script descriptions and instructions how to hook it into 3DEXPERIENCE. Obviously, you want to make sure you're able to maintain it going forward. So make sure you have the necessary MQL or spinners, another way to import scripts, statements and commands in place. Make sure you properly prefix and document the the customization name so we know that it's a customer-specific customization. And always make sure to have or request the source code. You don't know who may need to maintain or change that script in the future, so make sure you always have access to the source code and that is properly maintained and stored for future use. So finally, let's talk about a return on investment for a simple script. And I always use this simple calculation here. But let's say we're going to develop a customization, and let's say it's going to cost $5,000. So can we get an ROI off that? So with that, we can say that let's say there's 10 engineers within the organization, and each engineer cost is $62.50. If such customization can save an engineer 10 minutes per day, across 200 days or across one engineer, you're basically saving $10.42. Across a whole year for that one engineer, you're saving approximately $2,000. And across 10 engineers, that's probably a $20,000 saving. So even in year one, that simple $5,000 investment can have a really large return on investment. And that can be expanded across multiple years to see how that ROI could grow. And within this presentation, and again, you can request it, I provided a simple Excel spreadsheet where you can plug in your own numbers and figure out what that ROI would be, based on your own unique situation. So with that, I would say that customization is a powerful and economical approach to expand and customize the 3D experience for enterprise PLM needs. Almost anything is possible. There's almost any requirement we can accomplish. And the cost savings and ROI can be tremendous, even for a 10-minute time-saving process. And don't get intimidated by what you saw. There was a lot of information. I try to cover it fast within the hour, but we're definitely here to work with you. So happy to address or talk to you about any additional questions or comments you may have. All that being said, I want to say thank you and open it up to any questions. If anyone has any questions, please type them in. So the first question was more about EKL and said, how do we get to the that programming interface? So So the first thing is you need to install the native client. So part of the 3DEXPERIENCE installation media is a native client, or even if you were to click on one of the apps through a dashboard, it may automatically download it for you, though the native clients are fairly big install. But once that's installed, you have access to it, and you can just, as I did, search for that data setup app and click on it, and it will launch the that data setup app within the native client. Next question dealt with, what language or what should we do versus, a JavaScript or an EKL script or even a widget for that means. And, it really depends, again, on the end customer's needs and what they're using in. If they're doing stuff in 3D space, which I showed you, then most likely the traditional approach or Java approach is the way to go. If they're doing things through the dashboard and widgets and native clients, then most likely it's a combination of EKL and web services. Now, if they're doing both, the 3D space and the native apps, then maybe we need a more in-depth conversation and have a more discussion with the end client to figure out the best approach. Because I would say there is no right or wrong answer. It really would depend on the specific scenario. Next question, how long does a customization take to write? And it really depends on the customization. If it's something simple, and we showed you a very simple example, it can be done in hours. More customizations are a little bit more advanced, and usually it's days to weeks. Usually not months, but day to weeks is usually the time frame. But in addition to writing the code, time should be reflected to make sure that the code can be debugged in a test environment, so that test environment's in place. Time can be spent to document the code. Time can be spent to fix issues, etc. So there's time writing the code, but there's also other tasks that go around with it that should be accounted for. Another question, maybe I should have said this at the beginning, is 3DEXPERIENCE and Novia, are they the same? So I'll answer that with yes and no. Dassault kind of I'd say Innovia is a part of 3DEXPERIENCE. So Dassault, I think, uses the term 3DEXPERIENCE to really encompass a solution that works with all their brands. So whether it be CATIA, which I was showing you, the web client, which is probably pieces of Innovia, some of their Delmia solutions, some of their Simulia solution, all that encompasses the 3DEXPERIENCE. They call it the 3DEXPERIENCE platform, which is a platform where all those solutions work on it. Innovia is a part of it. It's a brand. So Innovia is responsible for a lot of the data management parts of it, and the data management parts of it are usually, are mainly around change, managing a bill of materials, some quality aspects, requirement management aspects, etc. So the Innovia piece of it is more around the governance or the data management piece of it, but 3DEXPERIENCE really refers to all the Dassault solutions out there that work within the platform. Hopefully that clears it up. So that looks like all the questions for now. Thank you very much for your time. If anyone has any further questions or comments, you see all my information on the screen. I'd love to get that input from you. So please feel free to contact me, and thank you very much for attending.